someone who does get it and who has been unapologetic in the view that all of Sydney needs to carry the load, especially when it comes to social and affordable housing, is our first speaker, the Minister for Housing, Rose Jackson. Not only has she been clear in her aim to address the current shortfall in social housing and get people off the wait list, but she's doing so with a lens that is firmly fixed on providing access and services to those in our communities that need it most. As she once famously said a few months back, which I think was aimed at those in the eastern and northern suburbs, if you're opposed to social and affordable housing in your area, get out of the way. It's definitely one of my favourite quotes of the year. And on that note, I'm going to get out of the way and hand the stage to Minister Rose Jackson.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. It's great to be here. Like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect and acknowledgement to any Aboriginal people joining us for today's conversation. Look, just to be clear, I wanted to give the context of the get out of my way comment, which has been, I think, unfairly maligned, celebrated in some quarters, I agree. I said, and I think I want to be clear about this up front because it does capture the approach that I have tried to take to the incredibly important task of delivering social and affordable housing, which I see as my key job. What I said was, one of my favourite Ruth Bader Ginsburg quotes is, "Fight like hell for what you believe in, but do it in a way that brings people with you." And I want to bring people on the journey of why confronting the housing crisis and delivering more social and affordable housing is incredibly important and can make our communities better places to live, more diverse places to live, thriving places, dynamic places, energetic places. The vision of delivering more housing, and in particular more social and affordable housing, is one that should excite people. And I want people to come on that journey and believe that the decisions that we are making are going to make Sydney a better place to live. But if you are not prepared to come on that journey, if you're not willing to see the benefits that are so obviously delivered by diverse communities with housing of all tenure types, then get out of my way. So to be clear, the first bit is I want to bring people on the journey, but the second bit is, yeah, but if you're just not going to see how important this is, we really don't have time. So just to be clear, that was the context of that quote. Now, I have to say, coming here today, it's been a busy fortnight. We've had a parliamentary sitting fortnight. Friday morning of a parliamentary sitting fortnight is always a slightly challenging time for any member of parliament, particularly when it's been the budget. So if I'm a little bit sort of, robotic today, you'll have to forgive me. And I did sort of feel like in the context of the fortnight that we've had, the budget that we've had, the passage of the HAF, which happened in the last fortnight as well, which is fantastic news. Thank you, Greens, for finally getting out of the way. Part of me just wanted to stand up and say, housing good, I fix it. Which, I think just really kind of captures what, another one of my favourite quotes is one that Howe, who was FDR's famous chief of staff, gave to Eleanor Roosevelt about how to give a speech. And his advice to her was, have something to say, stand up, say it, and then sit down. And so part of me just wanted to get up and say, yes, I recognise there is a housing crisis. It's core business for the government to confront it. We know we have to work with you to do that. Thank you. And then go and sit down. And partly, I think, my comments today, for many in this room, many of the partners that we have in this room, in the private sector, in the community housing sector, our government partners love to have people here from Landcom, from the Land and Housing Corporation, Trina, our new rental commissioner. They've heard me say a lot of these things before, and I am a bit conscious of, in a way, for many people in this room, getting up and saying the same thing over and over again. But partly, I do that because it really does emphasise the critical role that we see confronting the housing crisis playing as mission critical for our government. So what I'm trying to do, particularly in the social and affordable housing space, is not just pose those questions to the community about what kind of Sydney we want to live in, but start playing an active role in answering them. And I think 3 key elements of that I just wanted to touch on, and then I think Chris and I are going to have a bit of a conversation, so there will be time for some back and forth as well. The first question is, what is affordable? What is affordable housing? And I think we can all recognise in this room, we don't have a shared definition of what that is. There isn't a clear understanding of what actually characterises affordable housing. Now, partly that's because that's different for a lot of people. You know, where you are on the income scale, what's going to be affordable for you is different. But I think that is a question that we do have to answer, particularly if we're going to build government policies around the incentivisation of affordable housing and deliver planning benefits, you know, the additional density, the additional FSR that are contingent on the delivery of affordable housing. Well, if we're going to do that, then it's pretty important that we all have a clear understanding about what the affordable housing component is. And so at the moment, people will be well aware, most of the time when we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about that discount on market rent. But as market rent ticks up so significantly, we are seeing more and more dwellings that are captured and characterised as affordable housing that for many, many people in the community are not affordable. And is that the kind of system that we want to wrap our arms around? Or is there a conversation about a better, clearer, more consistent national definition of what affordable housing actually is? So that's one area where I think the conversation is incredibly important. The second area is obviously planning reform. Now, Paul is coming later, and we're a little bit of a sort of, you know, thing one, thing two team, the Minister for Planning and I. We work very well together, and I don't want to, you know, preempt too much what he's going to say, but I did want to say this in terms of my view about obviously the importance of planning reform. And you know, Paul, I know, sort of shares this view too. We want to reform the planning system not because we want to save money or we want anyone else to make money. That's not what is motivating us. Our reforms of the planning system are about delivering more houses. And I say that deliberately because if we can save money or people can make money, we're cool with that. We're relaxed. Benefits for all, happy days, but it isn't what is motivating us. We are motivated to reform the planning system to deliver more homes, particularly from my point of view, more social and affordable homes, but it doesn't matter. We know we have to lift supply overall. And I think it is important to be honest about where we're all coming from. What is motivating our actions? So we're not trying to save money. We're not trying to help anyone else make money. We're trying to deliver more homes. And every reform we make in the planning system is going to be motivated by that framework. The third thing I'd say is it's really important to me that despite the urgency that I hope you see the government brings to this task, despite the enthusiasm that we have to confront the housing crisis, we know that it has to be sustainable. And this is a really important point because when Adam put that figure up about the 75,000+ homes and said it doesn't seem like much, I mean, I almost fell off my chair because, oh my God, it seems like a lot. And that is a record number of completions that we would achieve. We came close to it in 2018. We came close to it. But then the figure really dropped, and it wasn't because of COVID. It wasn't because of COVID. It was because the reforms were not done in a sustainable way. Not only do we have to deliver a record number of homes a year, we have to deliver that for 5 years and then into the future. So we have to make sustainable change. We can't do things that are not going to be sustainable environmentally. And, you know, it's clear that this government's commitment to net zero is a significant part of our framework as well. We want to talk about the impact of the built environment on our achievement of our climate goals. So they have to be sustainable environmentally, but also they have to be sustainable socially and economically. And that means, again, bringing the community with us. And Paul has been clear about this, and I've been clear about this. It's about delivering quality homes and quality communities, great places for an individual family to live in, and great suburbs where we all have access to amenity, access to infrastructure. And I mention infrastructure a little bit nervously because, of course, not only am I the housing minister, I'm also the water minister, and often at these events a sort of orderly queue forms of people complaining to me about the slow delivery of water infrastructure. So fair enough, I hear your concerns. Don't know if anyone from Sydney Water's in the room might want to sort of jump on that hand grenade for me. But I do accept that the delivery of infrastructure essential for the delivery of housing has been a problem, and water is a big part of that. And actually, in some ways, the combination of the housing and water portfolios, makes it easier for me to try and get a handle on that. But nonetheless, that's what that sustainable delivery is about. It's about having all of those elements lined up. So there is a school for the kids to go to. There is a road to get you in and out of your suburb. You can flush the toilet. There is a park for your kids to play in. That's sustainable. That's building sustainable social places where we can all share in the benefits of having that great dynamic city. So that sustainable reform is also incredibly important to me. Look, I'll just finish by saying I know that government needs to do more. We've taken that first step in the budget. I use a few analogies when I'm talking about how we're trying to confront the housing crisis. The one I'll use today is the plane was hurtling towards the ground. We see those numbers crashing, everything's, in that one direction. We've pulled it up. We've pulled the tip of the plane up, the nose has risen, has a long ascent. There's a long ascent, we know that, but that's the journey that we're on. It does require vision and leadership from the government. It requires us to talk about the crisis. It requires us to engage on those solutions. It requires us to lean in. There are suburbs in Greater Western Sydney where 50% of the suburb is owned by the Land and Housing Corporation. 50% of suburbs, entire suburbs in Greater Western Sydney are owned by the Land and Housing Corporation, by the New South Wales government. So it's not just about talking, it's about doing. It's about us lifting on our land. And I won't talk about all of the announcements that we've made. We can have that conversation with Chris, but suffice to say, we know we need to do more. We need you to do more too. We need everyone in this room to lift. If you're in the private sector, if you're in local government, if you're a government partner, if you're a community housing partner, we've all got to lift together to make sure that we have those clear understandings of what our goals are, delivering affordable housing, delivering more homes, doing it in a sustainable way. And I think if we do that, we can start to see that plane climb a little bit, and soon we'll have our heads in the clouds. So thank you for coming.
G'day everybody. If I haven't met you, I'm Christopher Brown, Chairman. Remind everybody now, the very non-executive Chairman of the Western City Leadership Dialogue with a wonderful new CEO. Adam, good kick-off. Thank you very much. Can I obviously add not only my acknowledgement of country, I intend to go a lot further on October 14 and acknowledge, recognise and celebrate that I want to walk together with our Indigenous colleagues into the future. So let's do what we can do. There's a lot of good technical reasons why people might want to vote no, but when my kids ask me on October 15, what did you do, Dad? I know what I'm going to say. Now, I also acknowledge we're on the, not only in the people, the Gullingarra, the Tharawal, the Durrig people across Western Sydney. We're also on the traditional lands of Liverpool. So to Mayor Manoon, to the people of Liverpool, thanks for having us. Minister, welcome to ground zero of Western Sydney's housing crisis. Ned constantly reminds me there's 30,000 properties approved by his council out at Austral that are still waiting for other approvals to go forward. So he says he's doing his bit.
I think we've got those Section 73 certificates moving now, Ned.
Nice.
So.
See, the ad's working already. Can I firstly, to you, Minister, apologise that in fact we're part of the housing crisis because we're still talking about it. If we can combine all of the summits, all of the papers, all of the Michael Koziol articles, all of the we've done and burnt them, the fire that raged could maybe solve the housing crisis. But I do think we have the chance to, and we're very focused today on a solution outcome rather than it's just, we're not here to whinge, we're here to try and solve some things. So to you, firstly, you said it's budget week, thank you. Big week. First budget, first Labor budget in 12 years. Why is this budget in your area, and you're not the Minister for Housing, you're effectively the Minister for Affordable and Social Housing particularly. Paul shares the housing responsibility in planning most housing, and you particularly on affordable. And you've also had to endure Dan Andrews' budget this week, who came out with a big housing package. After 12 years, why is this a good Labor housing budget as opposed to those that have gone before it?
The budget this week, as I've sort of said and I alluded to here, there is no pretense from me that that budget in and of itself is going to be adequate to resolve, confront the housing crisis. I don't pretend that. The Treasurer himself, in the budget speech, in the actual speech to the Parliament, acknowledged we are taking the first steps. We know long-term reform is needed. And so it's a good budget in my view because it does acknowledge that the housing crisis is real. And, I do think this is a contrast between us and the previous government. I mean, the word crisis is obviously overused and, I sort of feel like its cachet, its power is perhaps becoming a bit diluted, as you say. We talk about it so much. Nonetheless, it is a crisis. They refuse to even acknowledge that, and you can't, the first step to fixing a problem is acknowledging that it exists. And so we have done that. The budget, I think, sits alongside the suite of reforms that we have actually already made. So obviously we've already come out with the first tranche of our planning package. I've done a range of work in the social and affordable housing space, pausing the sale of our housing, getting the government land audit up and running. All of that started before the budget. So the budget was just the next layer. What did it do? The two key things: one, infrastructure funding. I mean, I mentioned it in my remarks. Everyone here knows it is a huge barrier to achieving the housing goals that we have, that we do not have the funding to deliver the infrastructure that is an essential bedrock for the delivery of housing supply, and there was money in the budget for that.
I stepped over the remnants of Chris Gould's from Sydney Water on the way in as he threw himself on the hand grenade for you.
So there's money in the budget for that, and there's also money in the budget to address some of the more, significant, emergency measures that we think we need. There's money for Landcom, Paul can talk about that, but one that I do think, I did want to highlight is that because I paused the sale of public housing, we have now a major black hole in our budget for the maintenance of public housing, because people in this room may or may not have been aware that the previous government did not deliver any direct funding into public housing. The only way that they could get money for maintenance was to sell their assets. So there was like a snake eating itself. They were on this downward spiral where they would have to sell their assets in order to maintain their assets. We've stopped that. Of course, that means that you have to put money in the budget for maintenance. And so we've started doing that. So those are the types of things that we have started doing in this budget to get us back on a course of delivering more quality homes. There is clearly more to do, Chris. There's clearly more to do. But we are trying to show that we're interested in taking those first steps.
Let me go again. You are the first Labor housing minister in 12 years. I know in recent times, Hume, one of our partners today, I think famously took over some properties in Maitland. Described to me at the time from the old LAC that had they operated or housed people in that way, they'd be in jail as a CHP. Do you, looking back in that, find if there's a classic Labor constituency generally, it's been public housing tenancy, from right back in the Frank Walker days when he used to manage estates into marginal seats, etc. That was a classic Labor vote. Do you come with a proud history? You think you talk about maintenance. Is there something you'll do differently than traditionally, a sort of a taking for granted, that stock not being reinvested in, being left to rot in some ways? How's it going to be different going forward for you for true social housing? Put affordable aside for a second. What's going to change?
I mean, you're absolutely right that the way that public housing stock has been run down over the last decade or so is, really appalling. I mean, I know Hume have those stories. Anyone who's visited any of the big estates, would, I think, be shocked at some of the conditions that people are living in. I mean, I think, what are we going to do differently? I mean, in a way, try and grow the amount of social housing. So one of the things that's happened is because we're down close to 4% of total stock is social housing now. So it really is concentrated in the most vulnerable people. If you have a job, you basically can't get into social housing.
It's not working class housing,
That's
it's welfare
right.
class housing.
It's almost everyone in public housing and social housing is on government income support. They are incredibly disadvantaged people, and they're concentrated in, big, as I said, big suburbs, where, there are massive land holdings or big estates. Unsurprisingly, those places are incredibly dysfunctional. So we are keen to do the work of growing the amount of stock so that you can start having a social housing system that better represents diversity amongst lower income groups in the community, not just concentrated on the most disadvantaged. But the other thing that we will do is, look to try and diversify those estates. Now, that's not going to be done in a way where we, carve off the, most prime land, give that over, for private development and sort of continue to concentrate out social housing in areas where land is cheaper and build dysfunctional communities. It is actually about creating spaces with genuine diversity, genuine tenure mix. But, as I said, we're coming off a very low base, Chris, and it is hard to, get that system moving again, get some momentum behind it. The last thing I'd say is Homes New South Wales, I think, is really critical to this vision, because we've had the Land and Housing Corporation over here, we've had DCJ Housing over here. That hasn't worked. We're bringing it together and having a central agency, Homes New South Wales, which covers the full gamut. Affordable housing policy is in Homes New South Wales too, so it covers the full gamut of social and affordable housing policy touch points, and I think is going to be a really good opportunity for us to demonstrate that, we take that form of housing tenure seriously. We want to see more of it, and we want to see it be quality places to live.
Okay, we've spoken about the crisis that is, we always should describe it. How many times we say it, it's a crisis. It's always a crisis when you haven't got a roof over your head for your family or appropriate accommodation. I know the growing cohort is middle-aged single women, that sorts of things. That's changed the profile. But on the subject of solutions, best I can tell, there's at least 300 social housing units been locked up for over 3 years at Tilapia that could have been housing people, a kilometre from where I grew up. And if we are in a crisis, we've spoken when Labor last came to office in '95, there was a crisis in delivering Olympic Games in Sydney. And the government turned to a governance model of a Coordinator General who simply said, I'm sorry, I'm not putting up with the bullshit. Cracked heads together, knocked down bureaucratic walls and delivered the best Olympics ever, and could only have done it under that then strong man, strong woman, strong person model to get it done. If it truly is a crisis, why are we leaving 300 apartments to sit there? And it's not just you, the whole system's allowing that to happen in planning. And why don't we really address a crisis with the war cabinet approach?
I mean, let's get serious though, and this is why we're having these conversations. Tilapia. Okay, Tilapia. The contract that was signed in 2018 hands almost all decision-making in relation to when construction commences over to Frasers. Now, Frasers are a good partner. We do work with them. It's not the government going slow, it's Frasers. And why? Because market conditions. Let's be honest, Chris, about what, it's not, if I could press a button and get Tilapia moving right now, I would. That's not in the contract that was signed. Now, I didn't sign that contract, the previous government did. Nonetheless, let's call that out. In the contracts that were signed for Tilapia, we should have that moving. There are 3 towers sitting there empty, roped off, because market conditions aren't exactly what the developer wants to see, and so there's no movement. The second reason Tilapia is held up is because the government's in a VPA contest question engagement with the council. We want to spend $300 million on a library and community centre. They want us to spend we want to spend $30 million on a library and community centre. They want us to spend 80. Well, we spent $80 million on that. That's even less social housing. Talopi is only delivering 22% of the new estate as social housing, which is never a contract I would have signed. Nonetheless, it was signed, 22%, and now we're in an argument with the council about how much money we're spending on a library and community centre. So local government needs to step up too. Now, I mean, Parramatta Council, good partners. But these are the honest conversations that we have to have. Honesty about why can't we get that estate moving? Well, because I could get in there, the bulldozers tomorrow, take down the towers, but then there'd just be open space. So, I need developers to understand that they've got to get moving here. I need councils to understand, come on, $30 million for a community centre and a library is good enough. That'd be a great community centre and library in any community. But that, estate by estate, that's the work I'm doing. And so partly that responds to your other question, which is, look, I'm open to...
Sounds like the job for a Coordinator General.
That's right. I'm open to war cabinets. I'm open to, Coordinator Generals. I'm open to whatever. But honestly, why don't the ministers should just do that? If there's I don't mind who does it, but I just see that as my job. At least in social and affordable housing, get in there and say, why isn't this moving? What's happening? Waterloo South, okay. I can make a change there, great, let's do it. Let's keep moving. Now, if there is, a view that there needs to be, because I obviously only, really my sphere of influence is social and affordable housing, and I accept your point, which is that, we need to get, the planning system engaged as well. And so, look, if something like that, is an idea we should look at, fine. But at the end of the day, if you've got ministers who've got a vision and are prepared to really drive, I think, those should be good ingredients to get things moving.
I think you once said to me, they often call me passionate. I can't imagine why they call you that. and frankly, I think a bit of passion is a really good thing in social and affordable housing. Speaking of partners, CHPs, friend, foe or frenemy, and is a true CHP only a not-for-profit CHP? Because we're, in a way, seeing almost this crunch, a concern that some people talked about them looking too private sector-ish. The other end talk, some extent the private sector might see them as an able partner now, but they'll take them out with a private version. How do we entrench a role for the true not-for-profit housing association that as delivery partner, both for capital and for government?
Yeah, definitely friend. Love our partnership with the community housing providers sector, and certainly with the passage of the HAF, that relationship is even more important. I would say I'm obviously not a minister who is disinterested in growing the direct government public housing stock, and I am extremely enthusiastic about doing that alongside the growth of the community housing sector, but that's a fantastic partnership. We need all of the above. I think, I actually see our former leader Luke Foley in the room, and I really credit him when he was leader of the Labor Party in 2015 in taking that important step towards embracing the community housing sector, and that's something that I really carry on, recognising that partnership between community housing and government housing. But it's all of the above. It's both. So we need to grow our stock. We need them to grow their stock. The HAF's important for that. I am of the view that, I want to see the community housing sector operate, as a not-for-profit sector where that partnership is based on constant reinvestment of profit into growing the social and affordable housing stock base. I don't think, certainly in my areas, in the social and affordable housing areas, we don't really have a space to be delivering profit to the private sector. That's not what social and affordable housing is for. Social and affordable housing is for housing the most vulnerable, and money should be reinvested into that purpose. And the CHPs in the room, almost all of whom I know, they're excellent tier ones. They're fantastic, they're capable, they share that vision. We have, a really great honest partnership with them. And so to the extent that they're managing social housing tenants, who otherwise would be government tenants, I love the honest conversations that I can have with them about my expectations as a minister for the support and the services that those tenants are receiving. And the CHPs are incredibly responsive to that. I know they take it seriously. And so that's why I think that model works. And to be honest, I think that model is premised on not-for-profit organisations who have people and community at their heart.
The clock says we've got to get off the stage, so let me give you the last one for you. Twofold. One, advance invitation. We're taking this posse back to London next year in June. I know you've recently come back in opposition to London, look at the housing associations, but it's a great model for us. So if you had to be hanging around London the first week of June next year and the Premier's allowed anyone to travel anywhere by then, we'd love to have you be part of it. But just, we'll talk to Paul later about the planning issues, but do you in your heart think a community has fully adopted the concept of an affordable and social housing crisis? And to that end, are they willing to say, you know what, that developer can have another 4 floors if 2 of them are for social and affordable housing? Do you think the punters are going to cop density and height for the greater good of providing secure accommodation for people who need it most?
I mean, I am hopeful that the community are understanding the nature and depth of the crisis. I mean, I do not think they will cop that if we're delivering shit boxes.
Density done well, I should say.
That's right. I mean, I think that is such a critical point. I make it.
Shit box, that's the
Paul
technical
makes
term.
it. Crap houses, whatever you want to call it. There are journos in the room, but I'm as you say, I'm used to calling things as they are. They're not going to cop it if we're delivering crap. So, but I think everyone gets that. If we're delivering quality buildings with childcare centres and gyms and cafes, and there's a park and there's an awesome playground and there's water play and there's wild play and there's a school around the corner and it's close to a train station, absolutely. Absolutely, they'll cop the 4 stories and they want to see the most vulnerable housed and they know we're having increased homelessness and they don't like walking around and seeing people sleeping rough or hearing of stories of women leaving violence or elderly people sleeping in cars and caravans and tents. They don't want to see that. They want to see the government doing something about it. They do care. Everyone in Western Sydney, everyone in Sydney, our communities are amazing. They're great people with big hearts and I love them and I love representing them. But there is a line, and the line is crap communities, crap places to live, stuck in traffic, kids in demountables, hours in emergency departments because there's no proper health facilities, nowhere for people to play. That's the line. That's when people are going to go, I'm not happy living here. I'm stressed. I'm sad. There's too much traffic. There's nowhere for me to hang out. But if we build those great communities which have those amenities, absolutely they'll cop the 4 stories, absolutely, and they want to see something done about the housing crisis. But that's what I say, that we have to do more, and everyone in this room has to do more. And I am hopeful that if we talk honestly about building those communities, which are great places for families to live, and really drive towards that outcome, then it's going to be embraced and it's going to be sustainable. And I think people are going to be happy to be living in those suburbs.
I think in opening you quoted a joint hero of ours, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and in closing I'd throw probably another person who we both look toward, Robert Kennedy, who used the famous Dante line. He says, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who at times of great moral crisis choose neutrality." Well, we are in a time of great moral crisis. It's called housing in Western Sydney, and I don't think you're a neutrality kind of person. Would you please say thank you to the Minister for Housing and Homelessness, Rose Jackson. Thank you. Wonderful.